The front door clicked shut and I heard the Uber pull away from the curb. Lauren and Declan were gone. Off to the Bahamas for 5 days of white sand beaches and overpriced cocktails while I watched their daughter. I turned around with a smile, ready to ask Carol what she wanted to do first. Maybe we could make pizza from scratch. Maybe watch that movie about the talking dog she loved so much. Maybe just sit together on the couch and read, the way we always did. But Carol wasn't reaching for her iPad. She wasn't opening her text-to-speech app. She wasn't typing out a message the way she'd done for 6 years. She was just standing there, staring at me. And there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Something urgent, something afraid. And then, my niece, the child I believed couldn't speak, the little girl who hadn't made a single sound since she was 3 years old, opened her mouth. "Auntie Brenda, don't eat the chocolates. Mom and Declan put something in them." Her voice was clear, perfect, like she'd been speaking her whole life. I looked at the kitchen counter. The box of Belgian chocolates sat there, wrapped in gold foil with a red ribbon. A gift from my sister, a thank you for watching Carol. Lauren knew how much I loved chocolate. She'd known since we were kids. My blood turned to ice. But I need to back up about 6 hours, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about family, about trust, and about the price of silence. My name is Brenda Walsher. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a senior software developer for a tech company based in Boston. Most of my work is remote, which means I spend 4 days a week in my home office, staring at code, debugging systems, and pretending that talking to my computer counts as social interaction. I know, thrilling stuff. My therapist says I use logic to avoid emotions. My therapist is probably right. But here's the thing about logic. It doesn't lie. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't smile at you while planning your destruction. People do that. And I was about to learn just how well my own sister had mastered that particular skill. Let me tell you about my family, or what's left of it. My father, Richard Walsher, died 4 years ago. Heart attack. He was 61, still working, still planning that fishing trip to Alaska he'd been talking about for 20 years. One morning, he was drinking coffee and reading the Globe. By noon, he was gone. My mother, Patricia, held on longer, but cancer doesn't care about willpower. It took her 16 months ago, slowly, painfully, while I moved back from San Francisco to be by her side. Lauren, my older sister, visited maybe once a month during those final months. 20-minute visits, always with an excuse ready. The traffic was terrible. Declan needed the car. Carol had a thing at school. I was the one who held Mom's hand when she couldn't eat anymore. I was the one who slept in the chair beside her hospital bed. I was the one who heard her final words, whispered so softly I almost missed them. "Watch your sister, Brenda. Something's wrong in her heart." I didn't understand at the time. Now I do. When Mom passed, she left behind a trust, $1.4 million. Everything my parents had saved over 40 years of marriage, Dad's life insurance, the equity from their house, every penny they'd worked for. The terms were specific. Both Lauren and I had to sign for any withdrawal over $10,000. Mom was careful that way. She wanted to make sure neither of us could drain the account without the other knowing. She also left me the family home in Brookline, a 4-bedroom colonial worth about $780,000. Lauren was furious. She said it wasn't fair. She said she had a daughter to raise, responsibilities I couldn't understand. But Mom knew what she was doing. Even at the end, even when the morphine made her drift in and out, she knew exactly who her daughters really were. I should tell you about Lauren now. She's 3 years older than me. Growing up, she was the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who could talk her way out of any trouble. I was the quiet one, the awkward one, the girl who preferred books to parties and computers to people. Lauren got pregnant at 19. The father was some guy she met at a club. He disappeared the moment she told him about the baby. Classic story. Tragic, really. She had Carol alone, raised her alone, struggled alone. I was already in San Francisco by then, building my career, climbing the ladder at a startup that would eventually get acquired for more money than I'd ever imagined. I sent checks when I could. I flew home for Christmas. I tried to be a good sister even from 3,000 miles away. Then Lauren met Declan Rice. He was charming, handsome in that slightly weathered way. A sales director for a medical equipment company, always talking about big deals and bigger commissions. He drove a BMW he couldn't quite afford and wore watches that cost more than my first car. They got married fast. Too fast. Within a year, Declan had moved into Lauren's apartment, then convinced her to buy a house in Newton they couldn't really afford. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen with marble countertops and appliances they never used. He never adopted Carol. Said he wanted to, but the paperwork was complicated, the timing was never right. Looking back, I think he just didn't want the legal responsibility. Carol was Lauren's daughter. Lauren's problem. He was just the guy who lived there and spent their money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Carol. Let me tell you about Carol. She was the brightest little girl I'd ever known. When she was 2, she was already speaking in full sentences. By 3, she was asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why is the sky blue? Why do people die? Why does mommy cry when she thinks I'm asleep? And then, seemingly overnight, she stopped. Lauren said it was neurological, something about the speech centers in her brain, a rare condition the doctors caught when she was 3. Nothing could be done. Carol would communicate through other means, text-to-speech apps, written words, sign language, maybe, eventually. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my sister. Mothers know their children. But here's what I didn't know. Here's what I wouldn't learn until that Saturday afternoon, standing in Lauren's kitchen with a box of poisoned chocolates in my hands. Carol wasn't mute because of a neurological condition. Carol was mute because my sister terrorized her into silence, and she stayed silent for 6 years to protect me. I trusted my sister completely. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was not paying attention to the one person who'd been trying to warn me all along, a 9-year-old girl who hadn't spoken in 6 years. That Saturday morning started like any other. I was in my home office, debugging a particularly stubborn piece of code, when my phone rang. Lauren's name flashed on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail. We weren't exactly close. Our conversations usually consisted of her asking for something and me saying yes. But she was my sister, so I answered. Brenda. Her voice was honey sweet. That should have been my first warning. Lauren only used that voice when she wanted something. I have the biggest favor to ask. Turned out Declan had surprised her with a trip to the Bahamas. 5 days, all-inclusive resort. Very romantic, very last minute. And they needed someone to watch Carol. Of course, I said, because that's what I always said to Lauren. I'd love to spend time with her. And I meant it. Despite everything, despite the distance between my sister and me, I genuinely adored my niece. There was something special about Carol. Even without words, she had a way of communicating. Those big, watchful eyes that seemed to absorb everything. The way she'd lean against my shoulder when I read to her, like my voice was a safe place in a world that had taken hers away. I drove over to their house in Newton around noon. It was exactly the kind of house you'd expect. Big lawn, expensive cars in the driveway, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about successful suburban living. The kind of place built on debt and lies, but I didn't know that yet. Lauren greeted me at the door with a hug. That was unusual. My sister wasn't really a hugger. Physical affection made her uncomfortable unless cameras were watching. You're a lifesaver, Brenda, truly. She looked perfect, as always, hair freshly done, nails painted a tasteful nude, designer luggage waiting by the door, the devoted wife about to embark on a romantic getaway. Declan was loading bags into the Uber that had just arrived. He barely looked at me, just a quick wave, a mumbled hey. He seemed nervous, sweaty. His eyes kept darting to the kitchen. But Declan was always kind of twitchy. I didn't think much of it. Lauren walked me through the house like I'd never been there before. Here's the kitchen, here's Carol's room, here's the remote for the TV, and then she opened the refrigerator and pulled out a container of soup. I made this for you, homemade minestrone. You've been working too hard, Brenda. I can see it in your face. You need to take better care of yourself. And then she reached into the cabinet and pulled out a gold box. Belgian chocolates, my favorite, the expensive kind I never bought for myself. She pressed them into my hands with a smile. I know how much you love these. Consider it a thank you gift for everything you do. Something about the way she said it felt off. Too warm, too caring, too much like the sister I wished she was instead of the sister she actually was. But I smiled and thanked her because that's what I did with Lauren. I smiled and thanked her and never pushed back. The Uber honked. Lauren hugged me again. 2 hugs in one day. Definitely weird. And then she was out the door, climbing into the car with Declan, waving goodbye as they pulled away. She handed me that box with a smile, the same smile she'd been practicing since we were kids, the one that hid everything. I stood in the doorway and watched until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the front door, turned around and found Carol standing there, looking at me like she was about to tell me the world was ending. I need to tell you about what happened before, the patterns I should have seen but didn't. 6 months before that Saturday, I discovered something strange in the trust account. $47,000 had disappeared over the course of several months. Small withdrawals, never more than $8,000 or $9,000 at a time, always just under the threshold that would require both signatures. Except they'd had both signatures, mine and Lauren's. The problem was I hadn't signed anything. I called Lauren, confronted her as much as I ever confronted anyone. Her response was immediate. Tears, apologies, a flood of explanations. Declan had made some bad investments. They were behind on the mortgage. She'd been too embarrassed to ask for help properly. She'd forged my signature, yes, but only because she knew I'd say yes anyway. She was going to pay it all back, every penny. She just needed time. I should have gone to the police. I should have contacted a lawyer. I should have protected myself. Instead, I let it though. Because that's what I always did with Lauren. I let things go, but some things don't stay buried. Then there was Thanksgiving, 5 months before the Bahamas trip. 14 people crammed around Lauren's dining room table, turkey and tension in equal measure. Declan had been drinking since noon. His cheeks were flushed, his voice too loud, his jokes landing with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Halfway through dinner, he raised his glass for a toast. To family, he said, and then he looked directly at me. And to Brenda, still coding away in that big empty house. He laughed. Maybe the computers are better company than people, right? At least they do what you tell them. Scattered laughter around the table. Lauren didn't defend me. She just smiled that careful smile and changed the subject. Later, in the kitchen, I found her loading the dishwasher. I asked her why she let Declan talk to me that way. "Don't be so sensitive," she said without looking up. "He's just joking. You know how you can be sometimes. A lot." She let that word hang in the air. You can be a lot. I stood at the sink with my hands in soapy water. I could feel my jaw clenching, my fingers tightening around the sponge. But I didn't say anything. I just kept washing dishes until my knuckles turned white. That wasn't even the worst part of that Thanksgiving. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I went looking for my jacket. I'd left it in the upstairs guest room. As I climbed the stairs, I heard voices from the master bedroom. The door was open a crack. Lauren and Declan, talking about me. "She's so pathetic," Lauren was saying. 34 years old, no husband, no kids, just sitting in that house counting her money. Mom left her everything and she doesn't even know how to enjoy it. Declan laughed. "At least she's useful, free babysitting whenever we need it, and she'll never say no. You've got her trained." Lauren's voice was cold, amused. "She's been trained since we were kids. She thinks being the good one means being the doormat. I figured that out when we were teenagers. Some people are takers and some people are givers. Brenda will give until there's nothing left, and I'll be there to take it." I stood in that hallway, jacket forgotten, listening to my sister describe me like I was a resource to be exploited, a mark, a fool. I should have confronted her, should have stormed in and demanded an explanation. Instead, I crept back downstairs, collected my things, and left without saying goodbye. That's who I was then, the sister who washed dishes and swallowed insults and never made waves. That's not who I am now. Back to that Saturday. Back to Carol standing in the hallway with 6 years of silence breaking apart behind her eyes. "Auntie Brenda, don't eat the chocolates. Mom and Declan put something in them." I set the box down on the counter like it was a bomb. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Then I turned back to Carol and sank down to my knees, bringing myself to her eye level. "Carol," I whispered it, like speaking too loud might break whatever spell had finally let her speak. You can talk?" She nodded. Her eyes were huge, scared, but there was something fierce in them too, something that had been waiting 6 years to come out. "I always could, Auntie. Mommy made me stop." The room tilted. I had to put a hand on the floor to steady myself. "What do you mean made you stop?" And that's when my 9-year-old niece told me a story that ripped apart everything I thought I knew about my family. Carol was 3 years old when it happened. A normal afternoon. She was playing upstairs in her room, some game with stuffed animals and complicated rules only she understood. She got thirsty, so she crept downstairs to get some juice, the way she always did. Mommy was in the kitchen, talking on the phone. She didn't notice the little girl standing in the doorway. Carol heard words. Most of them she didn't understand, but some of them she recognized. Aunt Brenda, money, out of the picture. When the old lady dies, we get everything. She trusts me completely. She's so stupid. She was 3 years old. She didn't know what out of the picture meant. She didn't understand trusts or inheritance or betrayal. But she understood Aunt Brenda, and she understood the cold, mean way her mommy said stupid. The next day, innocent and confused, Carol asked her mother a question. "Mommy, what does out of the picture mean?" Lauren's face went cold, colder than Carol had ever seen it. She grabbed Carol's arms, too hard, leaving little bruises that would fade before anyone noticed, and knelt down until they were face to face. "Listen to me very carefully." Her voice was a whisper, but it was the scariest whisper Carol had ever heard. "If you ever speak again, to anyone, about anything, something terrible will happen to Aunt Brenda. Your voice is dangerous. Every word you say hurts her. If you love your auntie, you'll never make another sound. Do you understand?" Carol loved me. I was the aunt who brought her picture books and read them in funny voices, the one who smiled at her like she was the most special thing in the world, the one whose visits made everything feel safe. So, Carol stopped talking. She was 3 years old. She made a decision to give up her voice to protect someone she loved. For the next 6 years, every time she wanted to speak, she remembered her mother's words. Every time she wanted to laugh out loud, to sing, to say, "I love you," she swallowed the sound. She learned to communicate through apps and written notes. She learned to be invisible. She watched other kids in school raise their hands, tell jokes, make friends easily. She sat in the corner and typed on her iPad. Teachers praised her for being such a good listener. They had no idea she was drowning in words she couldn't say. And my sister used that love as a weapon. I sat there on Lauren's kitchen floor, tears streaming down my face as this child explained the sacrifice she'd made. 6 years. 6 years of silence. 6 years of terror, thinking that every word she spoke might hurt the person she loved most. Lauren took her to doctors, played the concerned mother, collected a selective mutism diagnosis, but she told everyone something different, something neurological, born with it, nothing to be done. She made sure no one saw the real medical records. I was in San Francisco, then back in Boston, but consumed with Mom's illness. I visited when I could. I had no reason to doubt my own sister about her own daughter. My 9-year-old niece gave up her voice to protect me, and my sister used that love as a weapon. Carol had more to tell me, because being silent had made her invisible. Adults forgot she was there. They talked freely around her, assuming she couldn't understand, couldn't tell anyone even if she did. Carol saw everything. She saw her mother practicing my signature over and over on scrap paper. The loop on the L was never quite right, but Lauren kept trying. She heard phone conversations about the trust, and before Brenda figures it out, and we'll tell them she's unstable, nobody will believe her. She watched Declan become more and more afraid of her mother. He agreed to everything, never questioned anything. He was in too deep, and Lauren made sure he knew it. She observed her mother perform for neighbors, church friends, teachers, the perfect mask of a devoted mother making sacrifices for her special needs daughter. The community gave Lauren awards, literally. There was a plaque on the mantle, Mother of the Year, it said. That plaque made me want to scream. And then, 2 nights before the Bahamas trip, Carol heard something that made her realize she couldn't stay silent anymore. She'd crept to the top of the stairs, like she'd done hundreds of times before. Lauren and Declan were in the kitchen, planning. "The chocolates will make her sick enough for the ER," Lauren said. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like she was discussing a recipe instead of poisoning her own sister. concentrated laxative compounds plus a mild sedative. She'll be violently ill for 2, maybe 3 days, barely conscious. What about Carol while we're gone? Declan asked. Mrs. Holloway next door will take her. I already told her Brenda has episodes sometimes. Anxiety, paranoia. The woman bought it completely. And while Brenda's in the hospital, Lauren continued, we drive to Providence. I found a lawyer there, Mitchell Crow, who specializes in emergency trust transfers. I have all the Ford's documents ready. Power of attorney, medical incapacity declarations, everything. We transfer the entire trust to my name alone. By the time Brenda recovers, it's done. She'll never be able to prove anything, and even if she tries, I have a file full of evidence that she's mentally unstable. Nobody will believe her. No cruise, no Bahamas vacation. Just a scheme to poison me, forge my signature, and steal $1.4 million. My own sister. I pulled Carol into my arms and held her tight. This brave, incredible child. She'd carried this weight for 6 years. She'd watched her mother lie to everyone. And when it truly mattered, she found the courage to break her silence. You saved me, I whispered into her hair. You know that, right? You saved my life. She hugged me back, small arms fierce around my neck. I couldn't let Mommy hurt you, Auntie. Not anymore. They thought they had 5 days to steal everything. They thought I'd be lying in a hospital bed, too sick to fight. They were wrong. The first call I made was to Tessa Vaughn. Tessa and I had been roommates in college. She went into nursing, I went into code. Different paths, but we stayed close. She was the kind of friend who showed up with wine during breakups and told you the truth even when it hurt. She answered on the second ring. Brenda, what's wrong? Tessa, I need you to come to my sister's house right now. Something happened and I can't explain it over the phone. Please, just come. Something in my voice must have scared her. She didn't ask questions. On my way. 40 minutes later, she was at the door, still in scrubs from her shift, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, worry written across her face. Talk to me. So I did. All of it. The chocolates, the scheme, and Carol, sweet, silent Carol, who had spoken for the first time in 6 years to warn me. When I finished, Tessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked over at Carol, who was sitting on the couch, watching us with those big, serious eyes. Tessa walked over and knelt down in front of her. You're the bravest kid I've ever met, she said softly. You know that, right? Carol almost smiled. It was the first time I'd seen anything close to happiness on her face since her parents left. Tessa stood up, all business now. Okay, first things first. Those chocolates need to be tested. I know someone at the hospital lab. She owes me about 14 favors. She can run a rush analysis tonight. If there's anything wrong with them, we'll know by morning. She pulled on latex gloves because, of course, she had some in her purse, and carefully collected a sample from one of the chocolates, sealed it in a small container. What kind of person puts something in chocolate? She muttered, shaking her head. I always knew Lauren was off. Remember when she told you that haircut made your face look less round? That wasn't a compliment. That was psychological warfare in sister format. I almost laughed. Almost. Now, Tessa continued, what else do you have? There's got to be more evidence if she's been running this scam. I looked at Carol. Honey, you said you know where Mommy keeps important papers? Carol nodded and climbed off the couch. In Declan's office. There's a locked drawer. I know the code. How do you know the code? I watched him type it. Lots of times. A small, sad pause. Nobody ever notices the quiet kid. She led us to the home office, a neat, carefully decorated room with a large desk, expensive computer, and filing cabinets that probably contained nothing but tax returns and lies. One drawer had a digital lock, 4 numbers. 0917, Carol said, September 17th, their wedding anniversary. Of course, Lauren would use something sentimental, made her feel clever. I punched in the code. The drawer clicked open. What we found inside made my stomach turn. First, bank authorization forms, my signature at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. It was close, really close, but I could see the difference immediately. The loop on my capital L was wrong. The slant was off. Anyone who really knew my handwriting would notice. Lauren had practiced, but she wasn't perfect. Second, bank statements from the trust account. 14 months of activity, withdrawal after withdrawal, always in amounts under $10,000, always just below the threshold that would require both signatures and trigger automatic reporting. She'd done her research. She knew exactly how to steal without setting off alarms. The total? $183,000. Gone. Stolen by my own sister while I sat in my house, trusting her completely. Third, printed emails between Lauren and an attorney in Providence, Rhode Island, Mitchell Crow. They discussed emergency transfer of trust assets, referenced my mental instability, and outlined a meeting scheduled for day 4 of the Bahamas trip. The meeting where Lauren planned to steal everything I had left. Fourth, and this one nearly broke me, a file labeled Brenda Mental Health Concerns. Inside were pages of notes in Lauren's handwriting, dated entries describing my erratic behavior, my depression, my paranoid episodes. Complete fabrications, all of it. She was building a paper trail, preparing to paint me as mentally unfit in case I ever challenged the fraud. My own sister was planning to call me crazy, to destroy my credibility, to take everything and leave me with nothing, not even my reputation. Tessa photographed every single document, every page, every date. "This is premeditated fraud," she said grimly. "This isn't some impulsive thing. She's been planning this for over a year." I was already organizing the information in my head, programmer brain kicking in. Dates, patterns, the amounts withdrawn each month, the signatures that didn't quite match. Numbers don't lie, and these numbers told a very clear story. Then I did something that felt natural to me, but probably wouldn't occur to most people. I opened my laptop and checked Declan's Instagram. He wasn't smart enough to turn off location services. Most people aren't. There it was, a story posted that morning. Declan grinning at the camera, airport coffee in hand. "Off to paradise," the caption read, with a palm tree emoji. But the geotag didn't say Miami International. It didn't say any airport at all. It said Providence, Rhode Island. They weren't even pretending to go to the Bahamas. They were 45 minutes away, preparing to rob me. They thought I was the naive one, the quiet sister who'd never fight back. But I'd spent 15 years solving problems in code, and this was just another bug to fix. The next 2 days were a performance. I played the sick sister perfectly. Text messages to Lauren, carefully crafted to sound weak and confused. Day 1. "Something's wrong. Been throwing up all night. So dizzy. I thought it was the soup at first, but nothing's staying down." Lauren's response came 4 hours later. A text, not a call. "Oh no, feel better. Make sure to stay hydrated. See a doctor if it gets worse." Heart emoji. She didn't ask about Carol, didn't offer to come home, didn't express any real concern at all. Day 2. Had to go to urgent care. They think it might be food poisoning. So strange. I can barely stand. Carol is fine. Mrs. Holloway next door is helping with her. Lauren's response. "Ugh, that's awful. Rest up. We'll be home in a few days. Don't worry about anything." Pink heart emoji. Don't worry about anything, right? Because why would I worry? I was just lying in a hospital bed, too sick to notice my sister stealing my inheritance. Except I wasn't in a hospital bed. I was in Lauren's living room, building a case. Tessa's contact at the lab came through. The chocolates contained a concentrated combination of Bisodal, an industrial-strength laxative, and valerian extract, a natural sedative. The amounts were precise, not enough to cause permanent damage, just enough to incapacitate someone for 48 to 72 hours. Hospital-level sick, exactly like Carol said. My sister hadn't tried to kill me. She was too smart for that. She just needed me out of commission long enough to steal everything. The second call I made was Derek Mullins. We'd worked together at my first tech job, back when we were both junior developers surviving on coffee and stubborn optimism. He'd left tech years ago to become a fraud investigator, corporate stuff mostly, insurance scams, embezzlement cases, exactly the kind of thing I needed. Derek owed me. I'd written a recommendation letter that got him his current job. Time to collect. He listened to everything. Then he connected me with Angela Suarez, an assistant prosecutor in Suffolk County, the kind of person who got excited about paper trails and forged signatures. Angela reviewed the evidence and didn't mince words. This is federal, interstate wire fraud, the money crossing state lines, the Providence lawyer, the conspiracy elements. This isn't just local. The FBI will want a piece of this. I felt a grim satisfaction at that. Lauren had made this a federal case all by herself. Angela coordinated with local police. They contacted the FBI, and someone reached out to Mitchell Crow, the Providence attorney who was supposed to facilitate the theft. Turned out, Crow had been having doubts. The signatures on the authorization forms looked slightly off to him. He'd been considering canceling the meeting anyway. When authorities explained what was actually happening, he agreed to cooperate fully. The sting was set for day 4. When Lauren and Declan walked into that law office expecting to complete their theft, police would be waiting. But first, we needed Carol's testimony. A child advocacy specialist came to the house. Everything was done properly, videotaped, a child psychologist present, following all legal protocols from minor witnesses. Carol was nervous. She sat in a chair that was too big for her, feet dangling above the floor. But when the questions started, she sat up straight. She used her voice. Still new, still strange after 6 years of silence. And she told them everything. What she heard when she was 3, the threat, the fear, the decision to stop speaking, the years of watching and listening, the night she overheard the plan about the chocolates. When it was over, she looked at me through the observation window. "That's the most I've talked since I was 3, she said. Her voice sounded tired, but something in it was lighter, like she'd been holding her breath underwater for years and finally came up for air. I wanted to run in there and hold her, but protocols. When they finally let me see her, I hugged her so tight I probably squeezed all the air right back out. "One more day," I told her. "Just one more day and this is over." She nodded against my shoulder. "One more day." Lauren thought she was walking into her payday. She had no idea she was walking into a trap 6 years in the making. Day 4, Providence, Rhode Island, 10:25 in the morning. The law office of Mitchell Crow occupied the 3rd floor of a professional building downtown. Nice view of the city, tasteful art on the walls, the kind of place where important documents got signed and lives got changed. Today, lives were definitely going to change, just not the way Lauren expected. I wasn't there in person. Angela set up a secure video feed so I could watch from Lauren's living room. Carol sat beside me, holding my hand. Tessa was on my other side, her jaw tight with anticipation. We watched the lobby camera as Lauren and Declan walked through the front door. Lauren looked perfect, professional dress in navy blue, modest jewelry, expression carefully arranged into concerned sister mode. She was carrying a leather folder, the same one from Declan's office, I realized, full of forged documents and stolen dreams. Declan looked like he was going to be sick, sweating through his expensive shirt, eyes darting around the lobby like he expected someone to jump out and arrest him. His instincts were better than I gave him credit for. They approached the receptionist, smiled, gave their names. The receptionist smiled back, pleasant and professional, and led them down a hallway toward the conference room, where 4 people were waiting. Lauren walked in first, confident, ready to close the biggest deal of her life. Mitchell Crow sat at the head of the table, gray-haired, serious, wearing the kind of reading glasses that made him look like someone's disappointed grandfather. He didn't smile when Lauren entered, didn't stand to shake her hand. 3 other people sat at the table, a man and a woman in plain clothes, professional and alert, and another woman with a badge visible at her belt. Lauren hesitated in the doorway, her smile flickered. "I thought this was a private meeting," she said, that honey-sweet voice again, the one she used when she sensed something was off. Crow's response was flat. "Mrs. Rice, please have a seat. These are Detectives Morrison and Chen from the Providence Police Department and Special Agent Holloway from the FBI. They have some questions about the documentation you've submitted." Through the video feed, I watched my sister's face. The flicker of confusion, the quick calculation behind her eyes, the decision to brazen it out. She sat down, crossed her legs, folded her hands on the table, the picture of cooperative innocence. "Of course, whatever I can help with. Is there some problem with the paperwork?" Declan hadn't moved from the doorway. His face had gone the color of old milk. "Mr. Rice," Detective Morrison said, "please, join your wife." He shuffled to the table like a man walking to his own execution, which, in a way, he was. Detective Morrison was calm, almost friendly. She began with basic questions: Lauren's identity, her relationship to me, her role as co-trustee of our parents' estate. Lauren confirmed everything, smooth, confident. She still thought she could talk her way out. She had no idea what was coming. Morrison placed 2 documents on the table, side by side. On the left, my signature from the forged authorization forms. On the right, my real signature from verified bank records. Mrs. Rice, can you explain why these signatures don't match? For just a second, barely a heartbeat, I saw panic flash across Lauren's face. Then the mask slammed back down. My sister has very inconsistent handwriting. She's always been that way. Honestly, she's not well mentally. I have documentation about her instability. I can show you. Detective Chen cut her off. We've reviewed your documentation, the notes about your sister's supposed mental health issues. He paused. Let the silence stretch. Interesting thing. Her employer describes her as one of the most detail-oriented people they've ever worked with. Her doctor confirms she's in excellent mental and physical health. 3 colleagues provided statements calling her exceptionally stable and trustworthy. The mask was cracking. That's different. They don't see her like I do. Family knows the truth. Mrs. Rice, Morrison's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. We have bank records showing $183,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 14 months. We have email correspondence with this office discussing emergency trust transfers. We have forensic analysis of your sister's signatures proving forgery. She placed another document on the table. And we have laboratory analysis of the chocolates you prepared for your sister. A concentrated combination of bisacodyl and valerian extract, enough to hospitalize someone for several days. Lauren's face twitched, just for a second, then she recovered. That's ridiculous. Those were Belgian chocolates, imported, expensive. I bought them from a specialty shop in Newberry Street. If there was anything wrong with them, it happened at the store. Morrison shook her head slowly. We traced the chocolates, Mrs. Rice. The shop you mentioned confirmed the purchase. They also confirmed the chocolates were perfectly safe when you bought them. What you did to them afterward, that's on you. She pulled out another photograph, a close-up of the chocolates, cut open to reveal something that shouldn't have been there. The lab found injection marks, tiny holes in each piece. Whoever contaminated these chocolates took their time, made sure the poison was distributed evenly, made sure whoever ate them would consume a significant dose. Declan made a sound, a small, strangled noise like a wounded animal. Lauren was frozen. The honey-sweet expression was gone. What was left underneath was something cold and cornered. You poisoned your sister's chocolates, Morrison continued. Not to kill her. You're too smart for that. You just needed her incapacitated long enough to steal her inheritance. Lauren's voice came out sharp, defensive. That's absurd. Those were a gift. I would never hurt my own sister. This is some kind of setup. Special Agent Holloway spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but carried weight. Mrs. Rice, interstate wire fraud is a federal offense. You're looking at up to 20 years. I'd suggest you think very carefully about your next words. And then Morrison pulled out a tablet. There's one more piece of evidence we'd like you to hear. She pressed play. Carol's voice filled the conference room, clear, steady, unmistakable. My mommy told me when I was 3 that if I ever talked again, something bad would happen to Aunt Brenda. She said my voice was dangerous, that every word I said hurt her. So I stopped talking for 6 years to protect my aunt. The recording continued, Carol describing what she'd overheard, the phone call when she was 3, the night before the Bahamas trip, the conversation about the chocolates, every detail delivered in that careful, serious voice. I couldn't let Mommy hurt Auntie Brenda. She's the only one who ever really listened to me, even when I couldn't talk. The recording ended. Silence. the kind of silence that fills a room after something breaks beyond repair. Beside me on the couch, Carol squeezed my hand. I could feel her trembling, or maybe that was me. On the screen, Lauren's face went through a series of transformations: confusion, denial, fear, and finally something ugly, something raw. Lauren stared at the tablet like it had grown teeth and bitten her. She can't. Her voice was cracking now, all the smooth confidence gone. She's mute. She's been mute since she was 3 years old. She can't talk. This is fabricated. You fabricated this. Her voice rose with each word. By the end, she was almost shouting. My daughter can't speak. She has a neurological condition. I have doctor's reports. I have years of documentation. This recording is fake. It's AI or something. You people manufactured this to frame me. Morrison's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. The gentleness made it worse. Mrs. Rice, you just confirmed that you believed your daughter couldn't speak, but according to medical records, the real ones, not what you told your family, Carol was diagnosed with selective mutism, a psychological condition often caused by trauma or fear. She let that sink in. Your daughter stopped speaking because you terrorized her into silence for 6 years. That's child psychological abuse, added to fraud, forgery, and attempted poisoning. Lauren's face twisted. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered completely. What came out was ugly, raw, the real Lauren, finally visible. She was supposed to stay quiet. She was never supposed to... Lauren? Declan's voice, shaking. Stop talking. Just stop. He turned to the detectives. His words came out in a rush. I want a lawyer, a separate lawyer. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. She planned all of it. The signatures, the transfers, the chocolates. I was scared of her. I knew it was wrong, but she said, his voice cracked. I'll testify. Whatever you need. Lauren turned on him with a fury that made even the detectives tense. You pathetic coward. After everything I did for us, everything I sacrificed, you're going to turn on me now? Her voice was rising. The mask wasn't just cracking, it was shattering into 1,000 pieces. I made us rich. I got us everything we have, that house, those cars, the life you wanted, and you couldn't even keep your mouth shut for 5 minutes. Declan shrank back in his chair. I didn't know about the chocolates. I swear I didn't know what you put in them. Lauren laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You knew enough. You knew what we were doing. You just didn't want to get your hands dirty. You wanted the money, but not the work. That's always been your problem, Declan. You're a coward. You were a coward when I met you, and you're a coward now. Mrs. Rice? Detective Chen stood. His voice was firm. You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, wire fraud, attempted poisoning, and child abuse. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Lauren didn't move at first. She looked around the room like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist, for someone who would take her side, for one more person she could manipulate. There was no one. Agent Holloway stepped forward. Mrs. Rice? Now. Lauren stood. Slowly, stiffly. Her eyes found the camera in the corner of the room, the one feeding to my screen. She stared directly into it. You think you've won? Her voice was a whisper now, venomous. Thin. You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of, Brenda. You never did. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She was still talking, still trying to explain, to justify, to manipulate, but there was no one left to manipulate. Everyone in that room had seen the evidence. Everyone had heard her own daughter's testimony. She was led out of the conference room, out of the building, into a waiting police car. I watched through the video feed as my sister, the golden child, the perfect mother, the woman who had terrorized a 3-year-old into silence and tried to poison her own sister, disappeared into the back of that car. Carol squeezed my hand again. It's over, Auntie Brenda. It's over. Tessa let out a long breath. 6 years? That little girl stayed silent for 6 years to protect you. And your sister? She shook her head. There aren't words bad enough. I couldn't speak. I just pulled Carol close and held her, while tears streamed down my face. But they weren't sad tears, not entirely. They were relief, they were gratitude, they were the release of something I hadn't even known I was carrying. My sister thought silence was her greatest weapon. She never expected it to become mine. The aftermath was messy, justice usually is. Lauren faced multiple felony charges, federal and state. The evidence was overwhelming. Her own lawyer advised her to take a plea deal rather than face a jury that would hear her 9-year-old daughter testify against her. She took the deal, 4 to 7 years. She'll be out eventually, but she won't be walking out to anything good. Declan cooperated fully, turned state witness. His testimony filled in gaps we didn't even know existed. 18 months in a minimum security facility plus 5 years probation. He signed away his parental rights without hesitation. I don't think he wanted Carol. I don't think he'd ever wanted her. The trust was frozen, audited, and eventually restored to my sole control. Most of the stolen money was traced and recovered. The family home in Brookline is mine outright now. Lauren's house in Newton was sold to cover her legal fees. Turns out all that marble and those luxury appliances don't mean much when you're paying attorneys by the hour. And Carol. Emergency custody was granted the week after Lauren's arrest. The hearing was quick. The evidence was clear. A child psychologist testified that Carol had been subjected to years of psychological manipulation designed to silence her. The judge didn't hesitate. She's mine now, legally, officially, permanently. The first few weeks were hard. Carol had spent 6 years believing her voice was dangerous. You don't unlearn something like that overnight. Some mornings she'd wake up and forget. She'd start to say something, then stop. Her hand would go to her throat like she was checking to make sure the words hadn't escaped. I'd see the fear flash across her face, the old programming kicking in. Those moments broke my heart every time. But slowly, day by day, she started to trust. Trust that speaking wouldn't hurt me. Trust that her voice was hers to use. Trust that she was finally safe. Her therapist says she's making remarkable progress. For a child who experienced that level of psychological manipulation at that young of age, she's incredibly resilient. The therapist calls her a survivor. I call her a hero. We're still figuring things out. She has therapy twice a week, a specialist in childhood trauma who doesn't try to rush her. Some days are hard. Sometimes she goes quiet again, retreats into that silence that kept her safe for so long. Those days, I just sit with her, read to her, let her know that her voice isn't dangerous anymore. But there are more good days now. Days when she comes home from school bursting with stories. Days when she laughs so hard she snorts. Days when she talks about her friends, her teachers, the boy in her class who she says is annoying, but she talks about him an awful lot. She started asking questions again, the way she did when she was 3, before Lauren stole that from her. Why do birds fly south? Why is the ocean salty? Why do some people hurt the people they're supposed to love? I don't always have answers, but I always listen. Last Saturday morning, we had breakfast on my back porch. Pancakes, because Carol has decided that pancakes are the superior breakfast food, and she will debate anyone who disagrees. Orange juice and fancy glasses, because she said fancy glasses make everything taste better, and honestly, she's not wrong. She was telling me about a dream she'd had, something about a penguin who could drive a car, a castle made entirely of waffles, and a very polite dragon named Gerald who apologized every time he accidentally set something on fire. It made absolutely no sense. It was perfect. I sipped my coffee and listened, really listened, the way I always did, the way I always will. This is what family is supposed to sound like. Not silence, not lies, not manipulation and fear. Just this, a kid rambling about waffle castles, morning light through the trees, 2 people who chose each other, sitting together, talking about nothing and everything. Carol paused mid-story and looked at me. Auntie Brenda? Yeah, sweetheart. Thank you for listening, for real listening, even when I couldn't talk. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Always, always. She smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches all the way to the eyes. Some people think silence means weakness, but my niece stayed silent for 6 years to protect someone she loved. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. And now she has a voice again, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she never has to lose it. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next one.